This weekend, the UFC has their very first pay-per-view card of 2025, which means it's time for me to go through my full card predictions. So picking the winner and method of victory for every single fight, main card, and the prelims. If you guys enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe. Would love to hear your thoughts down below. Do you agree, disagree with my picks? And then also keep in mind there will be timestamps, so if you guys want to jump around to specific matchups, that is totally cool. Those will be in the description. But starting off here with Tagir Ulanbekov taking on Clayton Carpenter. I think this is a fun matchup, fun way to start this card. Tagir's 15-2, Carpenter is 8-0. Both these guys are pretty grappling heavy, but I think they have a pretty fan-friendly style. 9 of Tagir's 15 wins are by submission. He's coming off back-to-back submission wins over Cody Durden and Nate Maness, so pretty decent competition. Clayton Carpenter is 2-0 in the UFC. Both those wins are by rear naked choke. When we look at Tagir Ulanbekov, he has been pretty inactive, and he's actually coming off a fight that was canceled due to him missing weight. He does seem pretty big for the weight class. Like I said, missed weight, so he hasn't fought in over a year, but I do still prefer him in this matchup. He has the higher quality wins. He's faced the better competition. He's a part of Khabib's team, and while that doesn't necessarily guarantee a win, typically those guys are going to do well. I do think this is a pretty big step up in competition here for Clayton Carpenter. I think he's definitely someone who can become ranked in the division. I just don't know if this is the fight that gets him there against Tagir. So I'm going to go with Tagir by decision. I do think Clayton Carpenter is going to be defensively responsible on the ground. Like I said, both these guys are very good grapplers, so I'm going to go with Tagir by decision. Now moving over to this next fight, going up a weight class, we have Ricky Turcios taking on Bernardo Sopaj. Sopaj had a really rough UFC debut. If you guys remember, it was like potential knockout of the year. He was on the wrong side of it. That flying knee knockout against Lokdog. He's taken a lot of time off, which is good to see. But, coming into the UFC, he was pretty highly touted. He's a finisher, 11 wins, 10 finishes, 7 knockouts, 3 submissions. Ricky Turcios, I think a lot of people were kind of high on him coming into the UFC. He won the Ultimate Fighter, beat Brady Hiestand, which was a pretty solid win. Hiestand has done well in the UFC. But since getting into the UFC, he has gone 1-2. The win was a split decision over someone who was 0-3 in the UFC. So even that win he got after winning the Ultimate Fighter was still not, a stamped great performance. Neither guy is really proven against the higher level competition, but I just think Sopaj has way more finishing upside. Turcios just hasn't showed me a ton. And the fact that he hasn't shown a lot and also isn't really a finisher, that doesn't seem like a great recipe. I'm going to go with Bernardo Sopaj to get his first UFC win, and I'm going to pick him by knockout in this matchup. Now, sticking around in that same weight class, we have Rinya Nakamura taking on Muin Gafurov. I really like Rinya Nakamura. He's a dominant wrestling prospect. He is 2-0 in the UFC, and in his 2 fights, so 30 total minutes, he's gone to decision both times. He has racked up 22 minutes and 30 seconds of control time. I mean, that is an insane number in a, 2 fights that total 30 minutes. The wrestling has been dominant. Maybe he hasn't, been locking in those finishes, but I don't think he needs to, for me to pick him in this matchup. I just don't think Gafurov has the grappling to compete here. He's 1-2 in the UFC. He was taken down 3 times by John Castaneda. He had 4 minutes of control time on him. He was submitted by Said Nurmagomedov in 1 minute. And then he did beat Kang, but he was taken down 3 times and controlled for a round. So the great grappler he went up against, he was submitted very early on. Guys who maybe aren't known for their wrestling, they were still able to take him down pretty consistently, get some control time. I feel like this is almost going to be a repeat of what we saw in Rinya's first 2 fights. Maybe he ends up finding the finish in this one. I'm going to pick him by decision, but like I said, I don't think a finish would be crazy here for Rinya. I think he's just going to be dominant on the ground, and it's just a matter of whether or not he's going to find that submission or ground and pound victory. Now, moving over to our first and only women's fight on this card, we have Karol Rosa taking on Ailin Perez. This has 3 rounds written all over it. Karol Rosa has gone to decision in all 10 of her UFC fights. 3 out of 4 of Perez's UFC wins are by decision. This is a pretty clear striker versus grappler matchup. I do think Karol Rosa is a better grappler than Perez is a striker, and she does have the ability to land takedowns. We've seen her kind of stamp fights with getting a takedown and then some control time, but she's typically opting to stay on the feet. Ailin Perez needs the takedown. In her 4 wins, she has landed 2, 6, 2, and 10 takedowns. I do favor Rosa in this matchup. She's more experienced. She has faced the better competition. I think she's a little bit more well-rounded than Ailin Perez, so I'm going to go with Karol Rosa by decision. Now we're starting to get into the fun matchups here. Grant Dawson taking on Diego Ferreira. This is a great matchup, either on the early prelims or like the very start of the regular prelims. This is a fun matchup. Grant Dawson is a dominant grappler. He's really turned the corner over his last 6-ish fights. He had submission wins over Jared Gordon, Mark Madsen. Both those are pretty solid grapplers, so those are impressive wins. Then he had 12 minutes and 30 seconds of control time against Damir Ismagulov. Now, Ismagulov was, I guess, exposed a little bit for his, I guess, ability to be controlled on the ground. But like, people were talking about Damir as like an elite prospect, someone who can make a run for the title, and Grant Dawson just completely shut that down. Then he had that setback against Bobby Green, the quick knockout loss, but then he followed it up with 14 minutes of control time against Joe Selecki, and then a ground and pound finish over Rafa Garcia. Diego Ferreira, really solid fighter, has some solid wins on his resume, wins over Anthony Pettis, Oliver Aubin Mercier. He has back-to-back wins over Michael Johnson, Mateusz Rebeski. I believe both of those were finishes. And he also has pretty impressive grappling. I just think at this point, Grant Dawson is on a little bit of a different level. He is a little bit chinny, so he can, get finished if he gets clipped. We definitely saw that in the Bobby Green fight. Doesn't have the cleanest striking. But you look at Diego Ferreira here, even though he is fairly powerful, knocked out Michael Johnson pretty badly. He's 39 years old. You never know, how much he's actually falling off at this point. Grant Dawson has looked so good. I'm going to go with Grant Dawson by decision, but I do think this is a pretty high-level matchup, a fun fight between these two dudes in the lightweight weight class. And I think if the division wasn't so stacked, like both these dudes would have a great case to be ranked. Now, moving over to the next matchup, we have Zach Reese taking on Azamat Bakoyov. Bakoyov is coming in to replace Cedricus Dumas, who had to pull out. And I think this is probably a tougher fight for Zach Reese than Dumas. Maybe not. Maybe it's close, but maybe the short notice, kind of turns it in his favor. But the Dumas matchup, I thought was pretty favorable matchmaking for Zach Reese. Bakoyev is the current LFA middleweight champ. He's 18-3, so he has like double the wins as Zach Reese has total fights, way more experienced, has a solid ground game, also powerful on the feet, coming off a great knockout win in his last fight. Zach Reese still pretty raw here. He is 8-1, 2-1 in the UFC, had a rough debut, had that slam KO loss to Cody Brundage, but since then he had a 22nd KO win, then a decision-heavy grappling win. I do think Zach Reese is just the more physically gifted fighter in this matchup. He's 6'4", 77-inch reach, pretty powerful, explosive. I am going to take him in this matchup. He was preparing for this fight. Even though, like I said, he is a little bit green in MMA, I think he can get it done here against Bakoyev. I'm going back and forth between decision and knockout. I'm going to pick decision, but I do think the knockout is definitely in play here. He's someone who can win in, any of the three ways. Now, moving all the way up to the heavyweight weight class, we have Jailton Almeida taking on Sergey Spivak. These are two of the better grapplers in the heavyweight weight class. I honestly just think Jailton Almeida is on a different level. The dude averages 6.85 takedowns per 15 minutes. His only UFC loss was to Curtis Blades, where he still had some success on the ground. Do you think Curtis Blades is just, probably the best wrestler at heavyweight? I guess you want to throw John Jones in there. That could work also. But Spivak, I don't think he's going to go out there, be stuffing these takedowns, picking Jailton apart on the feet. I think Almeida's going to have his way in this matchup. I think he's going to get Spivak down, and I think he's going to submit him in the first round. I do think there are just very few dudes in this weight class who can stop the wrestling attack of Jailton Almeida, and I just don't think Sergey Spivak is one of them. Now, probably one of the more anticipated fights on this card, even though it's not on the main card, Peyton Talbot taking on Raoni Barcelos. The odds on this one are insane. I think Peyton Talbot is up to like minus 1,200, and I know Peyton's good. I know people are high on him, but they're acting like Raoni Barcelos is like some sort of scrub here. The dude's 7-4 in the UFC. Like, he's coming off a win, has had a very good UFC career, has struggled as of late, 2-4 in his last 6. But Raoni Barcelos is not some sort of bum, which it seems like the odds might be implying that. They could also just be implying that Peyton Talbot is going to be, a future title challenger, a future contender. He's 9-0, 8 finishes, 3-0 in the UFC. Even though I did hype up Barcelos a little bit, like, I can't pick him in this matchup. It's tough for me to see Peyton Talbot losing this one. I'm going to go with knockout. I'm going to go round 2 knockout. I think he settles in a little bit, but I do think he finds the finish here against Raoni Barcelos, and I think he keeps it rolling. Maybe gets a shot at the top 15, maybe one more fight before he gets there, but I think he keeps the hype train rolling. And I believe this is the final fight before the main card. We have Bogdan Guskov taking on Billy Elikana. This is because Johnny Walker had to pull out. I think it was fairly recent. So Billy Elikana stepping in on short notice. It's light heavyweight, so both these guys, kill or be killed. Either one could finish the other one. Guskov, I'd say specifically, is kill or be killed. Not the most defensively responsible guy. He's going to go out. He's going to throw bombs. I just have a tough time picking against him here. He's had success over UFC caliber guys, has a top 15 win over Ryan Spann. In his 16 wins, he has finished all of them. So the dude's dangerous, 14 knockouts, 2 submission wins. I think he's physically going to be the bigger guy. Elikana could definitely be UFC caliber, but I just don't know how you pick against Guskov in this matchup. I'm going to go Guskov, round 1 knockout, also known as Evil Anthony Smith. Now moving into the main card, I think this is a pretty fun card here. We're going to start off with Kevin Holland taking on Reiner de Ridder, RDR. I think this is a very, very interesting matchup because both these guys have glaring weaknesses. It's just going to be a question of who can capitalize first. For Kevin Holland, obviously it's his takedown defense at 185. It's been terrible. You look at all his recent fights up at 185. Recent is in like the last 4 or 5 years here. Jacare, even though he had a round 1 finish, Jacare took him down 2 times. Derek Brunson took him down 6 times. Marvin Vettori took him down 11 times. Chris Daukaus in their short fight took him down once. Alex Oliveira, 2 takedowns. Tim Means, 2 takedowns. I think that Means fight was down at 170, maybe the Oliveira one also, but the takedown defense has just not been good for Kevin Holland, and RDR is a legit submission threat. 13 of his 18 wins are by submission. He has wins over solid competition and 1 championship, won his UFC debut against Gerald Meerschaert. On the other side, though, talked about how they both have glaring weaknesses. RDR's striking and his striking defense looked completely abysmal in the Jared Meerschaert fight. Like, he was getting clipped by Meerschaert, who is not at all known for his striking. He was getting touched up, which is not a great sign, especially against Kevin Holland, who is a significantly better striker. And Holland has real power, even up at 185. Like, he 100% can turn the lights off here for RDR. So it's pretty much like, does Kevin Holland knock him out before he gets taken down and submitted? I will say Kevin Holland has solid jiu-jitsu, so maybe he gets like a gimme round. I am going to pick Kevin Holland. Now, if RDR goes out, takes him down in a minute, and submits him, I would not be shocked. But even in that fight against Gerald Meerschaert, although his grappling is great, the wrestling didn't look like amazing. Obviously, it's a different opponent. Meerschaert, a great submission threat. But I'm going to go with Kevin Holland. I think he finds the knockout, but tough to trust Kevin Holland. He doesn't always fight, with the smartest game plan. RDR is dangerous. I'm going to lean Holland, but like I said, I feel like this one could definitely go either way. Now, down at lightweight, also a pretty fun fight. Beneil Dariush taking on Renato Moicano. I think a lot of people are just going to pencil in Moicano in this fight, and I get it, right? He's been on a roll. This is a bad matchup, though, on paper. Moicano is pretty reliant on getting the fight to the ground. He does not have a ton of power in his hands. He has 1 knockdown in 17 UFC fights. When you look at his last 4 losses, those were all matchups where he was unable to land a takedown, which pretty much, just made him a sitting duck on the feet. Beneil Dariush has an 80% takedown defense. He only allowed 2 minutes of control time to Mateusz Gamrot. Gamrot went 4 of 19. Everyone thought that was like the stepping stone. Gamrot was going to get that win, be in title contention. Beneil Dariush was having none of that. Just shut down Gamrot, dropped him badly in that fight. He's fairly powerful, like I said, did drop Gamrot pretty impressively. Both these guys are 35 years old, which kind of seems crazy because it feels like they're on very different trajectories. You have Moicano, who's on a 4-fight win streak, compared to Dariush, who has been knocked out in back-to-back fights. I think the big question is just going to be, how diminished is Beneil Dariush? Like, is he going to be a shell of his former self? Like, is he 90% of the dude that fought Gamrot, or is he 80, 75, 70? We just don't know. Like, maybe he's just losing, getting knocked out because it's extremely high-level competition. Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan. But, those knockouts can change a fighter. They might not be the same. I'm going to pick Moicano by decision, but I do think it's going to be more competitive than others expect. Plus, Moicano, man, his grappling has just looked so dominant in these recent fights. And you look at Gamrot, right? Like, he only got 2 minutes of control time, landed 4 takedowns. But if Moicano lands 4 takedowns, like, that could very easily turn into him just like banking multiple rounds by getting the back and just riding out those rounds. So I'm going to pick Moicano, but I do think it's going to be closer than maybe some people are expecting. And then here we have the big three final fights. The first one is Jiri Prochazka taking on Jamahal Hill. This truly feels like a 50-50. Both these guys have fight-ending power. Jiri's proven to be the more durable guy, but will it still be there after the Ferreira fights, right? Like, you get knocked out twice, especially the most recent Ferreira fight. Like, that was a pretty tough one. Pretty much got knocked out 2 times. Took a lot of potential unnecessary damage when the fight should have been stopped. So is that durability still going to be here against Jamahal Hill? I don't think there are going to be any takedowns in this matchup. I slightly lean towards Jiri, and if I'm picking him, I'm going to go with round 1 knockout. I do think he has the better resume. Think he has the better wins. Also has like the somewhat recent win over Alexander Rakic, whereas Jamahal Hill had the Achilles injury, then came back, didn't look good against Ferreira, got knocked out, pretty quickly. There's no guarantee that Jamahal Hill is going to return to that like pre-Achilles tear form, like the dude who fought Glover Teixeira, and before that. So I'm going to go with Jiri here. Would I be shocked if Hill knocked him out? No, Jiri's hittable. Jamahal Hill hits super hard. Feels like a 50-50. I'm going to go with my guy Jiri. And then the co-main event, the first title matchup, we have Merab Dvalishvili taking on Umar Nurmagomedov. This is just a super high-level fight. You have Merab, who was on an 11-fight win streak, last 4 wins against O'Malley, Cejudo, Yan, Aldo, just a murderer's row right there. Probably has the best cardio in the UFC. The dude's an absolute machine, which is why it's his nickname. And he also showcased kind of different styles of wrestling. In the Yan fight, it was just an insane amount of volume. The dude shot nearly 50 takedowns in that fight. Then you look at the O'Malley fight, and he kind of realized he didn't want to be shooting in a million times. You run the risk of running into a knee, something like that. And he kind of picked his spots, I think, better than he had in previous fights, where it was just, made a concerted effort to do that. And then you really saw the control grappling, where in the Yan fight, it was like takedown, Yan gets up, shoot again. And he was just consistently shooting, wasn't holding him down for a ton. The Sean O'Malley fight, he did get a lot of control. Merab is somewhat hittable on the feet. You can hurt him, but he does a pretty good job moving. He's not a stationary target. We saw that in the O'Malley fight. Like, it was tough for O'Malley, even when they were on the feet, to land anything of significance. You look at Umar Nurmagomedov, this dude is a serious challenge for Merab. He's super well-rounded, a very good wrestler, but also a super creative striker. When we're looking at all the dudes on his team, Khabib, Islam, Usman, like those are like the big names. He is definitely the most, I guess, like well-rounded striker, just in terms of like he throws everything, right? He has like lead leg, question mark kicks. He can do a lot on the feet. I know a guy like maybe Islam has had more actual success, knocking out Volkanovski, hanging in there with Dustin, but Umar is legit on the feet. The thing about Umar is that he just doesn't have a ton of high-level like competition wins compared to Merab, who's gone through a murderer's row. Umar's really one high-level fight was against Corey Sandhagen, and he won, clear decision, didn't dominate on the ground, racked up around a control time, outpointed Corey Sandhagen on the feet. I think the question in this fight is, can Umar stop the wrestling of Merab? I don't see Umar like going out there and ragdolling Merab, right? Corey Sandhagen defended very well. I think Merab is a significantly better wrestler. I just think it's going to be like, can Merab actually get his wrestling going against Umar? I think if this is a pure stand-up fight, you have to side with Umar. The odds on this one are kind of crazy. Like Merab, great champion, in my opinion, a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. Umar's like a 3-1 favorite or larger at this point. I am going to go with Umar. I do think those odds seem a little bit disrespectful, but I have to imagine Umar is going to stop or at least mitigate, the control time, the takedowns, and I do think he is going to be the cleaner, better striker on the feet. So Umar by decision is going to be my pick. And then the final fight here, Islam Makhachev taking on Arman Tsarukyan, a rematch here. Another super high-level fight. This main event, just great fights. Both these guys are pretty well-rounded. I think both have shown the ability to win on the feet or on the ground. You have Arman coming off a split decision win over Charles Oliveira. Before that, he had the KO win over Beneil Dariush. Arman is great, right? He's beaten very good competition. He's looked good. I just don't know how you bet against Islam Makhachev in this matchup. Might not have the same grappling as Khabib, but his striking is legit, and it's probably only getting better at this point. Dropped Oliveira, knocked out Volk, was hanging in there with Dustin. I expect the majority of this fight to take place on the feet. I don't see either guy having a clear grappling advantage. Like for Islam, like I said, he does not have the same wrestling as Khabib. He is not able to dominate Volk on the ground, was not able to dominate Dustin on the ground. I'm not saying he wasn't, able to rack up control time, but it's not like he was going out and just ragdolling these dudes. I think Arman is a better wrestler, especially at 155, than both of them. So I don't really see him having a ton of success. Arman, struggled to control a guy like Mateusz Gamrot. I don't think he's going to go out and rack up a ton of control time against Islam Makhachev. So I think a lot of this fight is going to take place on the feet. And I just think Islam is the better striker. He's more tested. I think he's cleaner, has the 5-round experience. Could Arman win? Sure. But if I'm just like picking these dudes, I don't know how you go against Islam. I'm going to go Islam by decision. He's always live to win, knockout, submission. Decision's going to be my pick. I think Arman's durable, but I do think Islam Makhachev gets it done and maybe ends up moving up to 170. So that is going to wrap it up for my predictions for every single fight on UFC 311. Let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.